I'm Dean Walker, and welcome to the Poetry of Predicament podcast, a podcast for people brave enough to face humanity's challenges and problems, and most importantly, our numerous predicaments. The Poetry of Predicament is a podcast meant to inspire us to bring forth grace, beauty, and connection with the web of life in the face of a predicament-laden world. Welcome to another quick episode in the Good, Bad, and Ugly of Science Communicators series here in the spring of 2021 here in the Poetry of Predicament podcast. And boy, no sooner had I released the one that, episode number 4 about Rex Tillerson and Arnold Schwarzenegger, than that day this extraordinary good news came out, some of the rare good news that comes out for the environmental community. So here's some of that, and hope you enjoy. Please do some celebrating. Okay. Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Good and Bad and Ugly of Science Communicators in the year 2021. And obviously, to a certain degree, we're also talking about science communicators in the past few decades as it applies to some of the human-caused collapse of Earth and human systems that we're talking about. And primarily, that ends up being the climate conversation, because that seems to be the controlled narrative that is allowed the most airtime. And in the last episode, which I just posted yesterday, this is late in May in 2021. I'm having a good time putting these together. I had no idea it would start to grow the way it has, literally to the minute. As I hit the post button, into YouTube for the last episode, which is having to do with a focus on Exxon and primarily their former CEO, Rex Tillerson, and also Arnold Schwarzenegger. I hope that was entertaining, at least, if not informative and thought-provoking. What really still lingers for me is the chilling tone of condescension, gaslighting, and lies from Rex Tillerson as he responds to probably the only serious question about oil companies' uh, contribution to the climate change predicament. Um, that was just chilling to me. So I don't easily let that go and just figure everything's okay now, and now that Trump's out of office and so on, everything's going to be fine. I just don't operate like that. I've got a little bit more from my own wounded childhood that has me wait cautiously for the other shoe to drop when things start to sound good. But I've got to tell you what's motivating me for this particular episode so soon on the heels of this last one that I've posted is that the news broke again, just literally as I was hitting the post button, that 3 separate, quite substantial um, events occurred to knock the oil industry, the oil corporations, back on their heels a bit. It involved 3 particular events for 3 particular organizations, and we'll talk a little bit about those, and perhaps the next one, and certainly in the clip that you're about to look at, you'll get the content of those events. And I've got to say, it's just one of the very few seriously uh, positive updates at scale that I can recall in the roughly 8, 9 years that I've been really seriously diving into this work. there just hasn't been much good news. It's been always in an intensification, always faster than expected in terms of the impacts of human systems on the environment and on um, people and their lives around the world at an existential level. So uh, I won't make this too long. This is a clip from a very recent Rachel Maddow show in which she reviews that she has just a few years ago written a book about that seamless, sinister, cynical wall of control that the oil companies have had for decades, and really how that has fueled almost single industry wide, excuse me, has motivated forward the continuation of the business as usual, existentially threatening paradigm. And so she's going to remind you of the book she wrote, and I'd recommend reading it. She's a heck of an author, and she's covered a lot of the most important pivotal ways that they have continued to control the global narrative. And it's ironic that she then gets to introduce these three very positive, all on the same day in different parts of the globe, events that what I'm looking at is like it comes up to the kings who are on their thrones, who have been in control for so long, as was described so well in the last episode. It comes up and it kind of knocks them on the head, kind of tilts their crown a bit. And I'm just again letting you know that my orientation in this is I am thrilled, I'm happy, very proud of the people who have kept up the pressure that you're going to hear Bill McKibben talk about, that he certainly has been involved with for decades. And I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. I know that it will take more than these substantial pieces to really get a momentum in the direction of something less existentially threatening than what we have going on now. I think we've barely begun to see the moneyed interests, the power interests, the fossil fuel interests in both corporate and government sectors. I think we've just barely seen them start to show their fangs, show their claws, show what they have up their sleeve, waiting for the right moment to put the activists in their place, to maintain control of the system that reaps them the greatest profits of any industry in the history of humanity. So again, that's just me. That's my kind of lingering paranoid stance from a wounded, traumatic childhood. I'll happy to take that offline and continue to work on it as I have again for decades. I invite you to allow yourself to celebrate a little bit. This is absolutely worth celebrating. These are very, very important steps. And I thought it was important enough to get into another video real quick and post it for you if you haven't seen it elsewhere. So I hope you enjoy, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.
I wrote a book that came out about a year and a half ago. I think that's how long ago it came out. It's a book called Blowout. It's basically about the power of the oil and gas industry, how that one industry is so powerful and has such specific incentives in the way they do business that they have this incredible record of corrupting basically every place they operate. The book is basically a warning about politics, about how democracies all over the world, including here at home, get undermined over and over again by that one industry. They're not just a normal business sector. They are, I think, an unparalleled thing where the companies in that industry regularly shape the governments of whole countries to fit the company's needs. So basically, I wrote Blowout to say, countries should watch out for that. It's not good. Well, now, the other side of that coin, though, is that we should be ready for governments to change, for whole types of government to potentially fail if and when the oil and gas industry that made them possible changes. If and when the oil and gas industry stops being what it is. If these mammoth world-shifting companies that can wrap whole countries around their little finger, if those companies lose a step or disappear or get forced to change into a whole different kind of enterprise, that really will change the world. It'll change governments around the world. And the reason it's worth anticipating that and thinking about how we're going to handle that when it happens is because it has been clear for a while now that that's coming. It's been clear for a while now that the oil and gas industry, for all that it has done to shape the world over the past century, it, in fact, is about to get basically unwired. And it's because they're the problem when it comes to climate. And as stupid as our own domestic politics have been forever about climate, the climate disaster is a real thing that really does need a huge fix, and the world is figuring that out. And the oil and gas companies are going to have to fundamentally get out of the way or change themselves into an entirely new thing for that to happen. And that's going to happen. I mean, in concept, in theory, we have known this was inevitable. It was going to have to happen. We didn't know exactly what it would look like when it arrived or when it would happen or how gradual or sudden it would be. We just have been able to see in theory that this was coming. And then today, all of a sudden, boom, it all just happened all at once. Remarkable day. And it's still seen as sort of a business pages piece of news, but it's more than that. I mean, first of all, this morning at The Hague in the Netherlands, a Dutch court issued a ruling, a court order that requires the massive oil company, Royal Dutch Shell, that's the biggest oil company in the world outside of China. The court order is going to require that company to cut its emissions by 45% by the end of this decade. That's their emissions, their suppliers' emissions, their customers' emissions. That means Royal Dutch Shell is going to need to stop being a burn fossil fuels company very, very quickly. Court order. Then right after that, boom, it happens to Chevron. This is also today, a shareholders meeting, an overwhelming vote by Chevron shareholders requiring Chevron to radically cut its emissions too. And then boom, another one, all in the same day, a huge one, Exxon. The flagship American oil and gas giant, Exxon, which led the way for so long in funding and promoting climate denial and conspiracy theories, Exxon today, against its will, had its shareholders dump some of its board of directors and install new ones who are going to make Exxon do a U-turn on climate, including specifically its plans to keep expanding its drilling operations. That is not going to happen anymore because Exxon, against its will, just got a whole new bunch of directors that it does not want, that it's going to make that company change course. And it all happened in the span of a few hours. Shell, Chevron, Exxon. Watching the Twitter feed of a climate expert like Bill McKibben today was like watching that guy on YouTube seeing the double rainbow, right? It starts out this morning. He says, wow, wow, wow. He explains what the Shell news is, and he links to it. He says, this could be game changing. Then a couple of hours later, Bill McKibben again, he says, whoa, yet more news on this watershed day. It's about Exxon. Then a couple of hours after that, he says, an utterly crushing day for big oil. The Chevron news, the Shell news, the Exxon news. He says, quote, thanks to all who fight. You push long enough and the dominoes tumble. Any one of those things happening would be huge news about the richest, most destructive industry on earth. But all three of those huge things happening within hours of each other all in one day, it's almost impossible to believe. You push and stuff eventually falls. Here's the headline in the Wall Street Journal tonight. Oil giants are dealt major defeats on climate change as pressures intensify. Joining us now is Bill McKibben, climate expert, one of the founders of the grassroots climate campaign 350.org. Mr. McKibben, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be with you, and on a day when, for once, we have good news to talk about.
Well, let's talk about it. Exxon, Shell, and Chevron all hit today with different judgments and votes that it seems like are going to force them all to change course when it comes to climate. All the news together feels like a very big piece of news, but how confident are you that this will make a difference?
Well, I don't think any of them by themselves will make a huge difference right away. I think what they're signs is that, a decade of battering away by activists is finally taking a real toll. It was only a week ago that the International Energy Agency said that the time had come for fossil fuel to stop expanding. And this was no, radical outfit. The International Energy Agency was set up by Henry Kissinger in 1974 to be the kind of club for oil consumers. But even they've realized that the mathematics of climate change is inexorable and that there is no way to deal with the problem we face unless we take actions like the one this Dutch court outlined today. I mean, they said Shell has to cut emissions 45% by 2030. That's exactly what the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change said about 2 weeks ago.
The decision affecting Chevron and Exxon today both happened through shareholder votes, which is not the kind of place that we look for the world's most exciting activism in terms of its impact on the broader world. But it does feel like this was sort of a magic trick almost in turning around these big companies.
10 years ago, Exxon was the biggest company on planet Earth. That's when Naomi Klein and I helped launch this fossil fuel divestment movement that's grown into probably the biggest anti-corporate campaign ever. We're at about $15 trillion now in endowments and portfolios that have divested. And that's helped bring so many people into understanding that these guys can't keep going on the way they're going. Exxon is still powerful, but it's now on the ropes in all kinds of ways. And remember, it's not just that they have to cut emissions. It's that as of tomorrow, they're that much less powerful on Capitol Hill when it comes to lobbying, in state legislatures when it comes to exerting their dominance. These things, once that weakening begins, then the momentum hopefully grows. Now, our problem is that we have to go very, very fast. We're behind the curve. The Arctic, most of the sea ice in the Arctic's melted. I mean, it's not like this guarantees any wins. It just is an awfully good sign that people should keep fighting and keep fighting hard.
Bill McKibben, environmental activist, one of the founders of the grassroots climate campaign 350.org. Bill, thanks for...
Thanks for watching another episode of the Poetry of Predicament podcast, produced by Dean Walker and the Living Resilience Alliance, www.livingresilience.net. Music today from Michael Hedges, as always, and also Port Blue Into the Sea. Also available on our website, www.livingresilience.net, is a wide array of articles, online learning series, arranging group and individual resilience coaching, and sign up for our every other Tuesday free support group that we call Safe Circle Calls.